Linda Hogan fights with Sky Daily over Hulk Hogan's property. 2 weeks. That's all the time that has passed since the wrestling world lost one of its biggest icons, Hulk Hogan. Just 14 days since fans across the globe mourn the passing of the man who once body-slammed giants and captivated millions with a single leg drop. Yet, even in the wake of tragedy, the story hasn't been about remembrance, or peace, or the legacy Hulk Hogan left behind. Instead, headlines are now dominated by something darker, something painfully human. A war is brewing. A bitter, public feud between the women who once stood beside him. Linda Hogan, his ex-wife of over 2 decades, has stepped back into the spotlight. But not for tribute, not for tears. She wants something else. A piece of what's left. A share in the empire the Hulkster built. It began with a whisper, tabloids murmuring about tensions at the private memorial service in Clearwater Beach, Florida. Sky Daily, Hogan's widow and the woman who stood by his side in his final years, had reportedly requested privacy. Cameras were kept away. Family only. But Linda wasn't just a name from the past. She had once been the woman behind the legend. The one who supported Hogan through the peak of Hulkamania, who lived through the highs and lows, the infidelity scandals, the reality show fame, and the eventual unraveling of their marriage. She wasn't invited. And some say she didn't need to be. Because days after the funeral, she made her own presence known in front of cameras and in front of lawyers. In a bombshell interview outside her California home, Linda Hogan didn't mince words. "I gave that man 24 years of my life. 24 years of building that legacy. I was there before the movie roles, before the fame. I helped shape Hulk Hogan. And now they think they can erase me." Her voice cracked, half from rage, half from something more complicated. But one thing was clear. She was not backing down. According to sources close to her legal team, Linda is preparing to file a formal motion contesting portions of Hogan's estate. She claims the settlement they reached during their 2009 divorce may have overlooked long-term royalties and residuals from intellectual properties Hulk developed after their separation. Sky Daily, on the other hand, is said to be livid. Friends close to the widow describe her as shattered, furious, and betrayed. For the past several years, Sky had helped nurse Hogan through his declining health, his countless surgeries, his spinal complications, and the chronic pain that had turned the once immortal icon into a shadow of himself. She was there when he collapsed last year in his Florida mansion. She was the one making frantic calls to 911, not Linda. She was the one organizing round-the-clock care and shielding him from prying eyes. And now, barely 2 weeks into her mourning, she finds herself under siege. Not from the media, not from fans, but from the woman who once shared the same last name. Friends of Sky say this isn't just about money. It's about respect. Hulk made his peace with Linda years ago, one source said. But they weren't close. There was a reason she wasn't at the wedding. There's a reason he rewrote his will. And Linda knows it. That's why this hurts even more. Sky doesn't want to fight, but she won't let someone come in and try to tear apart what Hulk worked so hard to put in order before he died. But the legal waters are murky. While the 2009 divorce left Linda with a considerable portion of Hogan's then wealth, including properties and a hefty alimony, sources say the bulk of Hogan's recent financial windfalls came after that period. Over the last decade, thanks to renewed merchandising deals, WWE royalties, podcast appearances, and documentary rights, Hogan rebuilt much of his lost fortune. And according to Florida probate law, unless Linda can prove her entitlement to future residuals from assets developed during the marriage, her claim could be dead on arrival. But Linda isn't giving up. It's not just about money, she told reporters. It's about legacy. About being erased. Still, for fans, the timing feels almost cruel. Just days ago, a fan tribute mural of Hogan was unveiled in Tampa, attended by legends like Ric Flair and Jimmy Hart. People cried. They told stories about the Hulkster's impact on their lives, about how he brought their families together in the 80s and 90s. But now, those emotional moments are being eclipsed by courtroom speculation and tabloid warfare. And then there's the question nobody wants to ask out loud, but everyone is thinking, what would Hulk have wanted? In private letters uncovered by close friends, Hulk had written about regret over the way things ended with Linda. We were both angry. Both stubborn, he admitted in one note dated 2022. But I'll always have love for her. No one else saw me become Hulk Hogan the way she did. No one else lived that madness with me. But affection doesn't equal intention, and sources say Hogan made it very clear in his final legal filings that Sky Daily would be the sole executor of his estate. Sky, for her part, has remained largely silent publicly, choosing instead to communicate through family, friends, and legal representatives. But the few words she has shared have been heartbreaking. In a short social media post now deleted, Sky wrote, "Grief is hard. Grief is private. I never expected to have to defend my place in his life, not now." The comments on that post exploded with support from fans, with some accusing Linda of being greedy, disrespectful, and obsessed with the past. Others defended Linda, calling her the original Hulkette and a forgotten partner who gave up everything. But make no mistake, this isn't just a public squabble, it's fast becoming a legal war. Court documents leaked late last night suggest that Linda is requesting a forensic audit of Hogan's estate, including all intellectual property created between 1985 and 2009. This would encompass action figures, pay-per-view percentages, and even his stake in the short-lived but lucrative Hogan Knows Best reality series. Her legal team argues that some residuals from those projects were funneled into later business ventures and media properties, meaning she may still be entitled to a cut. The question now becomes, where does the line of entitlement end? And where does legacy begin? For nearly 2 decades, Hulk Hogan and Linda were the power couple of wrestling. They weren't just a marriage, they were a brand, a force. But that marriage ended with bitterness, betrayal, and public spectacle. And while Hogan later reinvented himself, found new love, and tried to live more quietly, the shadows of his past, especially the woman who helped him build it, never fully went away. Some insiders are speculating that this fight may escalate further. One former WWE associate who worked with Hogan during his early resurgence in the 2010s claims there are unreleased documents, contracts, and even video footage that may reveal who truly controlled Hogan's post-divorce earnings. Hulk was paranoid in his final years, the associate said. He knew everyone wanted a piece of him, past and present. That's why he tightened things up legally, but it might not be enough. Meanwhile, fans have started to choose sides. A recent poll by a wrestling blog showed 68% of respondents siding with Sky Daily, saying Hogan's final wishes should be honored without interference. But 32% voiced support for Linda, arguing that the first wife, the one who stood through the hardest years, deserved more than a quiet goodbye and a name omitted from the headlines. This story isn't going away. And for Sky and Linda, the pain of loss is now tangled with something even harder. The fight over what remains. The homes. The cars. The merchandise. The trademarks. The memories, and maybe, just maybe, the truth about who really stood behind Hulk Hogan when the cameras weren't rolling. But the deeper you dig into this story, the more complicated it becomes. Because for all the legal filings and public statements, this isn't just a tale of money or legacy. It's a story of broken relationships, of unresolved wounds, and of 2 women whose lives were shaped by the same man, yet whose paths now seem destined to clash in the ugliest of ways. It's not just about what Hulk Hogan left behind in his will. It's about the emotional wreckage left behind when a family fractures and never fully heals. Sources close to Linda suggest that her motivation may be rooted in more than just financial frustration. They describe a woman who has felt increasingly erased from wrestling history, a woman who spent decades watching her contributions to one of the most iconic figures in pop culture be slowly rewritten, or worse, forgotten. She watched the world celebrate him while quietly pretending she never existed, one confidant said. She was the manager, the businesswoman, the fixer. When things broke, Linda picked up the pieces. But when it came time for credit, she was nowhere in the picture. And to some extent, that may be true. In the modern telling of Hulk Hogan's rise, from WrestleMania triumphs to crossover stardom, Linda's presence is often a footnote. She was there, yes, but rarely spotlighted, rarely praised. And after their split, her public image was further dragged through the mud by tabloid drama, DUI arrests, and a messy reality show narrative that painted her as angry, jealous, or unstable. Now, with Hogan gone, she may see this moment not only as her final opportunity for recognition, but also a chance to reclaim her version of the story. But the stakes aren't just emotional, they're tangible. Hogan's fortune, according to some financial analysts, may exceed $25 million in value when including residuals, licensing agreements, memorabilia royalties, and intellectual property rights tied to WWE, New Japan, and independent media ventures. Sky Daily, as the named executor and widow, controls access to these assets. And that's where the conflict deepens. Linda's legal team is now seeking to subpoena several WWE representatives and merchandise managers who may have been involved in ongoing royalty distributions. The claim? That Linda never opted out of certain long-term clauses negotiated while Hogan was still under contract with Vince McMahon's company. If proven, it could mean a small, but significant portion of future profits are still legally tied to her. And while it may not strip Sky of control, it could muddy the waters enough to force a settlement. But it's not just lawyers weighing in now. Members of Hogan's extended family are beginning to speak out, and not all of them are siding with Sky. Nick Hogan, Hulk and Linda's son, made a cryptic post on social media just days ago. It was a black and white photo of him and his father from years ago with the caption, "Don't believe the headlines. Sometimes the truth is in the silence." No names were mentioned. But fans quickly speculated that it was a nod of support to Linda, who has remained close with Nick over the years despite the family's fractured public image. Meanwhile, Brooke Hogan has remained entirely silent. Long seen as the emotional glue of the family, Brooke's absence has only added to the mystery. Some insiders say she's choosing neutrality. Others claim she's simply exhausted. Brooke has been through this her entire life, one close friend told TMZ. She's tired of being dragged into it. She lost her father. She's grieving. She doesn't want to pick sides, especially not now. And yet, whether Brooke speaks or not, the media circus grows. TMZ, the Daily Mail, People magazine. All are now circling this feud like sharks, waiting for the next soundbite, the next teary confrontation, the next courthouse scream. And both women, Linda and Sky, are under a microscope neither of them asked for, but both now inhabit fully. There's talk of a sit-down interview. A major network reportedly approached Linda with a lucrative offer to tell her side, on camera, with no filters. The offer includes primetime coverage and a six-figure deal. Whether she accepts remains unknown. But such an interview could change everything. It could shift public sentiment. It could reignite old rumors. It could reframe the entire narrative of Hulk Hogan's final years. Sky, meanwhile, is said to be in quiet talks with her own media contacts. Not to wage war, but to protect Hogan's image. She reportedly feels that every legal maneuver, every public accusation, chips away at the memory she holds dear. She wants to honor him, said one family friend. But it's hard to do that when the person he shared decades with keeps pulling his name into controversy. And through it all, the wrestling world watches. Legends have begun to weigh in, carefully, cautiously. Ric Flair, who attended Hogan's private memorial, released a short but pointed statement. Terry loved deeply, and he loved many. This is a time to remember his spirit, not fight over his name. Booker T, always more candid, said during a podcast, "Look, I don't know the legal stuff. But what I do know is when someone gives their whole life to this business, you don't want their final chapter to be courtroom drama. Let the man rest." But rest may be a long way off. Because this isn't just a family feud, it's a cultural flashpoint. In many ways, it reflects the tension between two eras. Linda represents the wild, rebellious, neon-soaked years of Hulkamania. She was part of the golden age, the excess, the drama, the spectacle. Sky, by contrast, embodies Hogan's final act: quieter, humbler, spiritual, health-focused. She saw the broken body, not the superhero. She loved him in pain, not in prime. Both women are, in their own way, defending their truth. And both, tragically, may be right. But in the end, what becomes of the property, the cars, the boats, the belts, the trademarks, may not matter as much as what becomes of Hogan's name. And in the current storm of headlines, social media rants, legal filings, and teary Instagram videos, that name, Terry Bollea, is being dragged across the public square once again. Not for glory, not for triumph, but for ownership and the irony? For all his power, for all his legacy, Hulk Hogan can't defend himself now. His voice is silent. His wishes, recorded in legalese, are being interpreted through the lens of grief and rivalry. He can't tell the world who mattered most. He can't stop the war between the women who once claimed to love him most. All he can do now is become the center of yet another story, one filled with pain, pride, and unresolved heartbreak. And as this feud escalates, as court dates near and statements grow sharper, one haunting truth looms over it all. The man who once asked kids to say their prayers and eat their vitamins is gone, but the fight is just beginning. As the third week since Hulk Hogan's passing unfolds, the legal chessboard becomes more crowded, more chaotic, and more emotionally charged. New players enter the field. More voices are added to the noise. And the once simple tragedy of losing a wrestling legend has mutated into a full-blown, front-page family crisis. Sky Daly, still reeling from the trauma of losing her husband, now finds herself attending emergency meetings with attorneys instead of grief counselors. Paparazzi stalk her neighborhood. Every time she walks out to collect her mail, someone's there to snap a photo, hoping to catch her without makeup, or maybe just a trace of tears. But the image she projects is steely, composed, guarded. Those closest to her insist it's not because she's cold, but because she's protecting what little privacy she has left. She's trying to keep everything together, said one longtime friend. She spent years watching over Hogan in his final days, making sure his estate was set up properly. He trusted her. He chose her. And now it feels like all of that is being questioned, simply because someone else couldn't let go. But Linda Hogan's camp sees it very differently. They paint a picture not of a grieving widow, but of a gatekeeper. Someone who allegedly kept Hogan distant from parts of his past, perhaps even from people he once loved. Some in Linda's circle claim that in his final months, Hogan became harder to reach, less available, more isolated. It wasn't natural, said a source familiar with the Hogan family dynamic. He started saying things like, "I'm too tired for that," or "let's talk next month." That wasn't Terry. That was someone managing his access. This allegation has sparked a furious response from Sky's attorneys, who've labeled it offensive, unfounded, and cruel. In a written statement, her legal team said, Mrs. Daly Hogan remained by her husband's side through every hospital visit, every surgery, and every sleepless night. She did not isolate him, she protected him. From pain, from exploitation, and from unnecessary stress. The idea that she would keep him from reconciling with his past is not just incorrect, it's vicious. Still, the court of public opinion doesn't operate on legal evidence, it runs on drama. And right now, the drama is unfolding in real time. Footage from outside a Clearwater law office surfaced this morning showing Linda exiting a black SUV, escorted by her attorneys, holding what appeared to be folders filled with documents. She didn't speak to reporters, but her presence alone sent a clear message. She's not backing down. Behind those closed doors, legal teams are now dissecting the finer points of Hulk Hogan's 2023 will. According to insiders, the document names Sky as the sole beneficiary of Hogan's physical assets, homes, vehicles, personal items, but the gray area lies in the language surrounding future income and intellectual property. Point 1 clause, reportedly inserted during a major estate revision in late 2022, states, any and all residuals, royalties, and intellectual property earnings stemming from legacy assets created during the course of my WWE and WCW careers shall be managed under the guidance of my wife, Sky Daily. The term managed, however, has become the battleground. Linda's attorneys argue that managed does not necessarily mean owned, and that Hogan's long-standing contracts with WWE may still give Linda a claim to portions of earnings, especially those originating from content created while they were still married. This may seem like legal nitpicking, but the potential implications are massive. If Linda wins this argument, she could be entitled to a portion of every future dollar earned from Hogan's likeness, DVD sales, documentaries, old wrestling reruns, even retro video games that use his image, and there's more. A newly leaked deposition from a former WWE executive suggests that in 2006, during a contract renewal with Hogan, a clause was added that allowed both Linda and Hogan to receive proportional payouts from certain merchandising rights. At the time, it was assumed Linda would remain with him for the foreseeable future. But after the divorce, that clause was never revisited, possibly because no one thought it would matter. Now it matters, and with that revelation, the Hogan estate feud has taken a darker turn, one that involves not just property or prestige, but a decades-old paper trail that could rewrite the division of Hogan's empire. The emotional toll is also deepening. Those who've been around the family for years say they've never seen such bitterness. "This isn't just about cash," said one old friend of the couple. "It's about history, regret, ego, maybe even guilt." Linda sees her whole youth in that brand. She was there when Hulkamania was born. Sky was there when it died. They both think they're entitled to own the story. And then there's the issue of public perception. Social media has become a battleground all its own, with hashtags like #TeamLinda and #HonorSky trending on opposite sides. One side sees Linda as a woman wrongfully erased from her rightful place in wrestling history. The other sees Sky as a modern-day widow trying to uphold her husband's final wishes amid a storm of bitterness. Wrestlers themselves are also feeling the strain. Sources within WWE say the company is trying to remain neutral, but that's easier said than done. Hogan was a titan in the industry, and any legal decisions about his name and image will directly impact WWE's merchandising and legacy content. Some insiders say the company may even get subpoenaed to provide royalty records and communications. But there's another silent player in this saga, one who hasn't spoken publicly but whose influence could be seismic: Vince McMahon. Though he's no longer at the helm of WWE, his imprint on Hogan's career is undeniable. And insiders suggest that McMahon, now partially retired and reclusive following his own legal troubles, may still be holding archived agreements or private letters between himself and Hogan, documents that could either reinforce or demolish Linda's claim. Whether those documents will surface remains unknown. But one thing is certain: the deeper this feud goes, the more damage it does to everyone involved, and that damage is no longer just legal. It's emotional, generational, irreversible. Because this war isn't only about who gets what, it's about who mattered more, who stayed, who loved, who deserved, and the saddest truth of all, the man whose name they're all fighting over can no longer weigh in. But what happens when the legacy of a legend becomes currency in a war of egos, pain, and grief? Behind closed doors, the legal teams are strategizing like generals preparing for battle. Documents are being pulled from vaults, NDAs reviewed, and decades-old contracts dusted off and placed under the microscope. Even Hogan's old managers, accountants, and business partners are being contacted. If they were ever involved in a financial agreement between Hulk and Linda, or if they witnessed any handshake deals over dinner tables or locker rooms, their recollections may now serve as ammunition in court. The courtroom drama is expected to begin in a few short weeks, assuming the two parties don't settle privately before then. But based on current tensions, a peaceful resolution seems increasingly unlikely. Linda, emboldened by public support and a growing digital following, appears determined to be recognized not only for her years as Hogan's partner, but as a foundational part of his brand. She's hinted at releasing her own memoir, One that, in her words, will set the record straight. Sky, meanwhile, is retreating further into silence. Her last public appearance was at a church service in Clearwater, where she was seen holding hands with Brooke Hogan, despite the family's previously reported distance. That single image, captured by a local photographer, reignited questions. Has Brooke taken a side? Is she supporting Sky in defiance of her mother? Or is she simply trying to hold what remains of her family together in the middle of a storm? The Hogan family, once featured in reality television as a picture of chaotic unity, now seems shattered beyond repair. Yet, perhaps the most haunting aspect of all this is how eerily familiar it feels. The world has seen it before, families tearing each other apart after the death of a loved one. Public icons being reduced to trademarks and royalties. It happened with Prince. It happened with Michael Jackson. And now, it's happening with Hulk Hogan. Fans are watching in horror as the icon of their childhood becomes a legal case study. Children who once wore yellow bandanas and shouted, "What ya gonna do, brother?" now scroll through TMZ headlines with a pit in their stomachs. Because Hulk Hogan wasn't just a wrestler. He was a symbol. A superhero. And to see his name tied to accusations, court orders, and legacy disputes, it feels wrong. It feels heartbreaking. Commentators and wrestling veterans are urging both sides to consider the bigger picture. Jim Ross, longtime WWE commentator and close friend of Hogan, took to his podcast to share a message. Terry wouldn't want this. He wouldn't want his loved ones fighting like this. He fought battles in the ring, not in court. This ain't the way to honor him. And yet, the gears keep turning. The estate's preliminary audit shows Hogan had an estimated $5 million in liquid assets, with the rest tied up in properties, royalties, and private business ventures. Some of the assets currently in dispute include the Clearwater Beach mansion Hogan spent his final years in, reportedly worth over $8.40 million, multiple vehicles, including a custom Dodge Viper, a limited edition Harley-Davidson, and the iconic yellow and red muscle car featured in Hogan Knows Best. Ownership stakes in 2 health supplement companies and a fitness apparel brand he co-founded in 2019. Intellectual property rights for his wrestling name, likeness, catchphrases, and archived WWE appearances. All of these, by Hogan's revised will, are set to transfer under Sky's stewardship. But Linda's legal argument centers not on what's being inherited, but what was already co-created while they were still married. Her case is that she wasn't just a partner in love, she was a business partner. And that distinction could change everything. Even Hogan's former legal advisor, a man who worked with the family during the 1990s, weighed in anonymously. There were plenty of times Linda was in the room when deals were struck. She signed off on stuff. She was listed on company documents. That doesn't vanish with a divorce. It depends on how cleanly things were severed. And frankly, with Hogan's brand being so tied to both of them during the peak years, this could get ugly. Indeed, the deeper this goes, the more it seems this isn't a black and white issue. It's gray, murky, laced with emotional debris and complicated timelines. Linda is not simply a bitter ex looking for a paycheck. She is a woman who helped build something and feels discarded. Sky is not a gold digger, nor a manipulator. She is a widow trying to honor the dying wishes of the man she loved. Both have a point. Both are grieving. And both now stand on opposite sides of a courtroom, speaking for a man who can no longer speak for himself. The world watches. The headlines multiply. And the tragedy compounds, because somewhere beneath the stacks of paperwork, the tabloid fodder, and the social media feuds, lies a simple, devastating truth. Terry Bollea, the man, not the myth, died too soon, and those left behind. They're still fighting over who loved him more. Meanwhile, within WWE itself, there's an undeniable tension growing. The company hasn't released any official statements regarding the estate battle, but behind the scenes, sources say executives are watching everything with clenched jaws and anxious eyes. Why? Because Hulk Hogan's name isn't just history, it's still business. Merchandise bearing Hogan's image continues to sell. Classic match compilations still run on Peacock and the WWE Network. New fans discover him every week through highlight reels, documentaries, and nostalgia content. And every single piece of that content, and the money it generates, is now caught in limbo. Should Linda Hogan win a portion of those royalties, WWE may be forced to retroactively revise how payments are split and to whom they are distributed. This could set a precedent. If Linda successfully argues that spouses or ex-spouses can claim future earnings based on creative or emotional contribution, it could shake up not only wrestling estates, but the entire entertainment industry. One anonymous WWE executive confessed to a sports reporter, "We're quietly panicking. We want to stay out of this, but if that courtroom rules in Linda's favor, we're suddenly looking at a situation where ex-wives and old partners of our legends come out of the woodwork demanding back pay. We're already dealing with legal headaches over likeness rights. This adds an entirely new layer." And that's precisely what Linda's legal team is targeting. They're framing the issue as precedent-setting, not just a personal grievance, but a fight for fairness, for recognition, for the forgotten women who helped build male legacies from the background while getting none of the credit once the spotlight dimmed. Her lead attorney, Gloria Hensley, told the press outside the courthouse, "This is not..."